Show. Welcome to Diversity Conversations, where we engage in thought-provoking dialogue to identify leadership solutions to today's most challenging conflicts. Stream live each week, Saturday 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Hosted by Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategist and CEOs Eric Ellis and Tommy Lewis. Join us and add your voice to this engaging diversity conversation.
Good morning, Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, the United States, and the world. My name is Eric Ellis. I'm the president and CEO of Integrity Development Corporation, and I'm joined this morning by my good friend and brother,
Tommy Lewis, president and CEO of Make It Plain Consulting. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Tommy. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a beautiful, beautiful Saturday, Eric, and it is African American History Month, continuing to celebrate that throughout the course of the month and as we move forward throughout the course of the year. And so it's exciting to be with you, Eric, man. I've missed you, man. I've missed you.
Right, same here. Let me ask you this. Are we still celebrating Black History Month in schools, or have our politicians banned that?
Yeah, right.
We are struggling, man.
You know, it is diminished from a perspective of celebration. I would like to say open celebration. There are some courageous school districts who are still saying that individual group identities still matter, right? And so if whatever it is, it can be immigration, it can be ethnic groups, race, it could be abilities, etc. With African American History Month, the fact of the matter is that there are African Americans still living in this country, believe it or not.
Right.
And so school districts are still struggling with counteracting, educating people about all people and the political kind of storms that, you know, kind of try to capture the moment to win elections and things of that nature.
Yeah, because if the reason why we sometimes have to have these targeted educational efforts is because the mainstream has only targeted the dominant culture. And so then if you don't get it done equitably in the mainstream, then you get these offshoots. People would rather not be an offshoot if they were, effectively included. So that's a conversation for another day. But how was your week, Tommy?
My week was very busy and it was excellent. So I was in Durango, working with a school district in Durango who is very much committed, Eric, over the last 2 years, specifically with us at Make It Plain, and then another additional year as they were starting their work independently. But they're still committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and the development of leaders within their district. And so I was spending time with their board of directors and went through a full day of training, the same training that we had deployed with their staff. Every 4 months, we do a full day training with their staff. Mm-hmm. It is unprecedented that a secondary school system will invest almost 24 full professional development hours for their staff to build their competencies, skills, and abilities to work with diverse and multicultural communities. And then I transitioned from Durango and I came home to Cincinnati and then immediately drove to Baldwin Wallace University, where they too are committed to this work. And I was facilitating their board of trustees winter meeting. Okay. So they only have 3 meetings a year. And this was the first one, 3 or 4 meetings a year. And so I was very blessed this week, Eric, that I was working with the highest level decision-making entities for a secondary school system in Colorado and a higher educational system in Ohio. And so it was great working with them. There were some opportunities with Baldwin Wallace where you had very different perspectives on certain topics. And so at times, the board members were not on the same page. They were not aligned to achieve their mission and purpose because their individual perspectives were conflicting with one another, right? And one was, what is diversity and what is equity? They have very different views from a leadership perspective. And so I pulled back from the definitions and really talked about leadership and what that looked like. How do you govern to achieve certain goals and objectives? So that's how my week was. That's how my week still is, because I'm still doing follow-up work.
Right.
But it's great, again, to level set, to breathe a little bit, right? And then to connect with you and our community.
Good. Well, I appreciate that update, Tommy. Had another exciting week as well, man. I love the work that you and I get a chance to do. I've got a client where the DEI Council is really doing their work. And I just find that exhilarating when a council is not simply looking at the list of demands that they're going to place on the executives of the company, but they're really looking at what can we do to own our own biases, to begin to model the right behaviors, and not be so preachy to the rest of the organization. And I'm just, blown away by that, because I think as they begin to do that work, Tommy, I think that it gives them the credibility to then place expectations on the leadership of the organization when you are doing your work and you find out how to. And I watched people apologize to each other on the council. I heard a story of a woman that said, look, I had a friend in the organization killing her boss, and I'm just chiming right in, killing her boss. Never met her, didn't know anything about her boss. Said I finally met her boss, and she was nothing like my friend told me. And I literally admitted to her boss that I've been killing you all over the company, and I owe you an apology. I'm sorry. And Tommy, I'm just moved by that. And the council, we've gotten really close, and we're like, okay, Eric, we see you tearing up there. Because I really, Tommy, man, I really care when people start getting this right, man.
Yeah.
They start doing their work, getting it right, then change can happen.
Yes.
And they had a sort of a union leader, the president that joined the council for the first time, and asked him for some thoughts at the end of the meeting. Was like, this reminds me of years ago when everybody was proud to be a part of the company, and it was more like a family. That's what this council sounds like. So I'm just grateful, Tommy, when those kinds of things can take place, man, and you just get a chance to be a part of that. That's an exciting time. So, enjoying that and continuing to enjoy working on music. I also want to just announce to everybody that there's so much technology that we're coming into in these days and times. And so it's a great time to be alive. And I think a great time for us to be able to find answers that help to make the world better. Tommy, I say this all the time, that we need an army of people that do what you and I do. The problems are greater than the number of people available to do this work. And so whenever you and I get a chance to have a guest on that can help us broaden the conversation around DEIB, I think you and I are both enthusiastic learners and excited to bring guests to our community. So I don't know if you want to start by introducing our guests.
Absolutely, Eric. And in that effort of broadening our and strengthening our army, if you will, I've done two things, Eric, over the last 6 months or so. One, I've really taken a look at my social media network. Some of them are the old platforms of Facebook and things of that nature. And there are some interesting stories, images, photos, and all that good stuff. And it's, for the most part, it's fun.
Right.
And it's been like that for some time. There's another platform that I believe it was founded and originated with a different objective. And that platform was LinkedIn. I believe LinkedIn was established for the connection of professionals. Right.
That's right.
And then over the last, year plus, it became a little bit of like a Facebook. Right. On LinkedIn, people are posting what they're eating and where they're traveled to and things like that. I'm like, that's not what I thought it was.
Right.
And so the second part is I decided to use LinkedIn as I thought it was established for. and I began to make contacts. And one of the contacts I made is with Debra. Debra, as she's joining us, I reached out to her. I found her in the space, invited her to be my friend. She accepted that invitation, and then I saw what she does. Went to the website at Impact Global Impact, and I said, let me invite her to the show. And I would tell you, one of the fastest responses to say absolutely.
Mhm.
And then Eric, a bit of a surprise to me, she reciprocated the invitation quickly to invite us to her platform.
Excellent.
And so that's one of my kind of mantras for this year is reciprocity. Do unto others and hoping that they do unto us so we can broaden our bandwidth to serve more people. So with that being said, we have the CEO and founder of Global Impact, Debra. She's joining us, and she's not in space right now. Her background is, but she's here on Earth. Debra, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. And thank you so much for, first of all, having these conversations, because I just am not seeing enough of these conversations, as you're both saying. Bottom line, we got to do this together. And so I just am so excited about this conversation for a lot of reasons, including when you opened up and started talking about open AI. So I love artificial intelligence, but I, of course, worry about the bias and unconscious bias.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
so I also,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm real freaked out about that. But
Yes.
on January 23rd, Microsoft announced that they were spending millions of more dollars to make sure it was fully accessible, which I love. But once again, accessibility means that you've broken down those unconscious barriers for anyone that might have a darker skin color than mine, for example, or, all of that stuff. So your voices are so important in education, and it's so important that we all come together. So I just am feeling very, very honored to be part of this. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, Debra. And if you may, could you share a little bit about yourself for our audience? And then as we begin the conversation, as you can see already, it's very fluid, very organic and natural. We do have a community that is across the U.S. They chime in. They may ask a couple of questions, and we will spotlight their questions for you to answer as well. Can you share a little bit more about yourself?
Yes, I will tell you that I'll do a visual description in case people cannot see, because I support the community of people with disabilities. So obviously, I'm always thinking about that. For example, my business cards, which I haven't given out in a while, have Braille on them. So just little things like that. But I am a white, mature woman. I'm not old, mature woman. And today I'm wearing a hat because my curly hair is out of control as usual. And I'm wearing a blue sweater. But the reason why I do that description is because in our community, some people can't see very well, some people. So if you take the time to introduce yourself visually, it makes them feel more included, but it's also gives you great data about what people are thinking about. Like, I like that purple shirt and I like that red plaid shirt. So anyway, but who am I? I am a global leader on disability inclusion. And that's wonderful. There are 1.3 billion people we know that have lived experiences with disabilities. We believe those numbers are much, much higher. But sadly, our beautiful world that we get to work together to help. Sadly, in this community, the same thing happens in all other communities. If you are Black and disabled, really not good. If you're LGBTQIA and disabled, that's not right. So for white and disabled, now we're going to also have to break down my community into two different groups, but we're the same in that we have our invisible disabilities, and then we have our physical disabilities that you can see. So I, as a person, identify with an invisible disability because I was diagnosed later in life with ADHD, which I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But also, I was going to say, you Eric, point to yourself, 65% of entrepreneurs, 65% of us are these ADHD broken people that, by the way, we're not, but we are part of the definition, and we do get excluded and discriminated against. I also am very proud to be a mother, and my daughter is 35 years old, and she was born with Down syndrome. And when she was born, she was my first child. And by the way, she was perfect, but I was really sad about how society responded to my broken baby. But she wasn't broken. So I started thinking, what does God want me to do with this? God is obviously talking to me here. So, and then on a sad note, and I'm going to be very calm about this, I lost my husband, in March. And to be hit by a car when he was a child, and it caused a major traumatic brain injury, but his beautiful brain rewired, and he got to grow up and have a beautiful wife and 2 beautiful children. But unfortunately, dementia came early for him. And so it took him to this beautiful place where there's no pain. Yay. So
Yes.
I am the community. I am the community. But
Yeah.
I want to do what I can do to make a difference. And I say something that's uncomfortable for white people. I'll just speaking white people in the United States. There was a silly thing trending on Twitter once, and it was white privilege. And the reality is, if you're white, sadly, you do have more privilege. It's pretty awful about how I see my son being treated versus my beautiful friends who have darker color skin than I. So I know it is, but I saw these silly things being said on Twitter. But what I said was, with my white privilege, I hold that door open. I'm dragging it open to let everybody else in, because we all have privileges. We're privileged to be growing up in the United States.
Yes.
We're privileged in so many ways, but we have to bring in others. We have to give the microphone to others. And I'll tell you one more thing, and I'm going to be quiet. I also have a brand new identity organization called Billion-Strong. And I'm just going to tell on myself, and that when I first created this, I was going to just be the CEO until I got it up and a little stable. And a friend of mine's like, oh, good, another white woman starting a disability organization. Great. And I'm like, dang it. And I thought, he's probably right. So what I did was I actually selected a very talented man to run this program that I hope you two might want to talk to. His name is Lamondre Pugh. I call him Dr. Lamondre Pugh because he's also a minister, and he's been given a doctorate, an honorable doctorate at from a biblical. I forget the name of it, but it's in South Carolina. It's a biblical college, and it's amazing what they do. And so he is a man that identifies as African American in the southern part of the United States, which is a little bit more prejudiced. I'm in the South, but it's just a reality, as we all know. But he also is a man with lived experiences with disabilities. He uses a wheelchair. He didn't think he could drive until he saw a man driving when he was like 8 years old that had disability. He was like, what? This man, the God's working through this man, it just makes your heart sing. And it's all about bringing us all together. Because another thing we keep seeing is like corporations will say, okay, let's include the genders. No, what about the black and brown? No, disability. No. It's all of us. So now I'm going to be quiet.
No, this is great, Deborah. This is Diversity Conversations. So not only do we talk about all things diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, but we talk about, as you mentioned, the entire community and us being in the community. We live in a real world that is extremely dynamic, right? And so we want to hear the stories, right? And I'll speak for myself here because we'll continue this talk. Eric and I talk with each other all the time, right? We seldom skip a beat. And so to hear someone else's voice, it's refreshing, right? It's refreshing. That's what it is. And so I do have a follow-up question, and Eric may have some others as well. So, in starting Global Impact and other organizations, particularly to engage and include those with visible and invisible disabilities, I have learned in my research, and I may be misquoted here, that the disabled person's community, visible or invisible, that this is the largest quote unquote minority group in America, right? Where it's not only those physical disabilities, but it's the invisible disabilities, as you mentioned, with yourself and Eric, Myself, I am 98% colorblind. It's an invisible disability. To hypertension, high blood pressure, cholesterol, arthritis, these things. Can you talk a little bit about how do we educate the greater community that even those people, say white, male, quote unquote, able-bodied, they too may have a disability and need support as well?
That's such a powerful point, Tommy, such a powerful point, because somebody one time I was speaking before a very large group of people and they said, what do you think your number one problem is in the disability community? Gosh. But I would say, well, number one and two is that a lot of people don't know they're part of our community. And if you do know you're part of your community, you don't want to be part of our community because we're broken. Right? I mean, society, thinks. And so,
Sure.
and the numbers are staggering, Tommy. They're staggering. There's 1.3 billion, as I mentioned, that I believe I mentioned, but 1.3 billion people with disabilities around the world. And then you start really digging into, once again, how are those people treated? Once again, it gets worse and worse and worse. And 80% of them have invisible or hidden disabilities, like the three of us, because being colorblind is considered it. Because if you do not design technology in the right way, you will be left out, Tommy, because you can't see certain colors. And I know that's your fault that you can't see. So that's why we're leaving you out. No.
Right.
Stupid. Right. This is ridiculous. Why would we do this? We know how to do this, but the numbers are staggering. And of course, you look at it in the States, and I think we should be proud Americans. I mean, I know there's a lot wrong with us right now, but there's a lot that makes my heart hurt about America. But at the same time, we are trying to figure it out openly and messily, and other countries benefit from our work. But I just always like to remind Americans, as soon as you walk outside our border, you step outside our borders, the Americans with Disabilities Act does not protect you anymore. And the United States, sadly, politically have not adopted the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Everybody else in the world, except like one country, hasn't. But us, anyway, that's political. But I just think Americans have to be brave with our conversations. And we also, Tommy and Eric, we have to do what you are doing. We have to come together and help each other. We cannot do it anymore alone. We cannot. We cannot say, I'll speak for the disabled people. No. And also, we're confusing brands, right? Because brands and schools, they want to include us, but they're getting information from everybody. No, let's come all together and say, all right, let us tell you how to include the people.
Right. Yeah. Well, I tell you, Debra, first of all, thank you for what you do. Thank you for your enthusiasm. It is powerful. It is infectious. I can imagine you as a child trying to make sure that everybody was included. And I just think that the world is a better place because you're in it, doing the things that you're doing. As we look at terminology, language changes and it continues to evolve. And as soon as you think you came up with something that respects the community and some of the, sort of affinity groups that exist within the community, it offends others. And so we looked at things like disability, and then we say, that's, saying I'm less abled or not abled, when in fact we're differently abled. But then we threw differently abled out there, and not everybody's like, what? Why are you calling me that? I don't buy that term. What do we do with our language? What do you see as the language that's most inclusive and respectful? I believe the answer is probably depends, but if you're talking about some generalizations and movement in that space, where are we today with respectful language?
Well, that's a great question. That's a great question, Eric. And guess what? We don't really have an answer, but I'll tell you what we tried to say about this answer is that we have to allow people to be whoever they are and to be proud. I would hope to be proud of our identities. But right now, societies are telling us, no, you can't really be proud of it. If you can hide something, I mean, it's just reality. And so we have, it's a very common in the United States for us to use people first language, people with disabilities, a person that is blind. It doesn't flow off the tongue as well. In the
Right.
United Kingdom, like disabled people. In the Middle East, in Northern Africa, they like, and really I should say this has started in the UAE, but expanding out, they like people of determination. Now, let me tell you, the Americans hate that word. We are
Right.
not, and
Right.
in France, people like handicapped, right? So, and it's tied to funding and laws, and so what we want to do at Billion Dash Strong, and I ask everybody to please join the free movement, but is to have conversations with the community all over the world to say, what should it be? And by good, could we just make mistakes if we use the wrong thing, and maybe give us a little break? And I'm going to give an example that happened to me. I'm very active on all of the social media, and I love LinkedIn too. I love LinkedIn, and I love that they're encouraging, accelerating voices that matter. If they find out that you're adding value to the communities, they will accelerate your voice. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell them about both of you. I'm going to introduce my connection at LinkedIn to you, because I'd love to see y'all become part of the voices they're accelerating around the world. And you know what? That is what LinkedIn should do. That's what Twitter should do. That's what you protect the people. You help us do our work. But I'm not seeing that on all of the channels, but I love LinkedIn for doing that. But I think we have to all decide together what the voices are, and to appreciate the differences all over the world and stuff. But it's still unfolding. But an example, one time I saw a post from the governor of Virginia who said they had put a law in our on our books that said, if you're an employer, you cannot discriminate against a person that somebody's knocking at my door.
No problem.
Oh,
So we'll have Deborah back in just a moment there, and we'll continue this. But I would say, and before you continue, Deborah, no worries at all. That I'm very, very inspired by what you're saying, and I do have a follow-up question and take a deeper dive. But please continue.
Yeah, and I so apologize. I'm home with my daughter, so sorry about that. But so they posted that, and I was like, I cannot believe we are discriminating still against Black women because their hairdos. What? So I said that. I said it on social media. It's like, I'm amazed at what we will pick on people for. And then an African-American responded and said, yeah, but that's right. That's the problem. You don't understand what we have. And I was like, wow. I was actually trying to support the community, but instead I got slapped down. But that's okay. Sometimes people get angry. But what happened, which made me sad, was the conversation stopped. Nobody would respond at that point because I don't want to be attacked. That made me sad because I did not know that my beautiful fellow sisters were having these problems. I knew a little bit, but not to the extent. So if I don't even know it and I can't express it and share it with my peers, so they also can, right. Anyway, y'all know what I mean, but I think we have to be better about that. We got to like give each other some breaks to mess up. But at the same time, we've been so hurt for so long in these communities, you know.
right.
But go ahead.
Deborah, I've been working with a number of organizations that specifically based on their charge and their charter, they are designed to help and to support persons with physical disabilities, right? And in the U.S., a number of organizations, if it's physical or mental disabilities, developmental opportunities. And one of the asks of me as a consultant supporting these organizations is we are purposed to care for persons with mental and physical disabilities. However, we're having a difficult time now and historically with hiring these same people in our organization.
Right.
And I'm perplexed. a little bit. Deborah,
Right.
I'm like,
Better workers show up more often, more dependable. I mean, come
indeed.
on, man, what's not to like about that?
So, any thoughts around, uh, and just to minimize it, right? African American company, and I say I'm having trouble hiring African Americans, whatever the case may be. But what is it about organizations that are uh, in the kind of the professional services or the service industry that may not make that mental shift to think and value its own identified individuals, right? To do the
Right.
work that needs to be done. I'm all over the place with the question, but it's a heartfelt question.
I agree, and it's a good question too, because what responsibility do we have each other now? And it was interesting watching these corporate. I work a lot with corporations, but I recently, and I want to pull you into this conversation, later, but I recently started working with a group out of the United Kingdom because my work is global. And they were saying, and we're finding that the education conversations and the corporate conversations aren't really coming together like we think they should. So I was excited listening to what you two were doing in the background and thinking, okay, I'm going to bring y'all into these global conversations if you don't mind, because your voices are needed there. But I just think that it's all about, can we just honor people's lived experiences? I know we can't right now. We're figuring that out. But what we're finding from these corporations, these employers, is that they do want to do the right thing and hire us the way we're asking, but they're confused about it. They're very confused. They just really are. So it's like, okay, well, I understand. Remember, I won't be mean, but the CEO formerly of Wells Fargo that said the reason why they were not promoting Black leaders was because they couldn't find them. And I thought,
Yeah.
and of course,
Yeah.
once they ripped his head off, God bless them, they're like, what? But you are right in that, sadly, you can't always find our community because we're not going to identify. We're going to be quiet. We don't want you to know. We're afraid you'll discriminate against us. And so, and then once again, you have all of the other diversity issues that go with that. But I think what I always say to these corporations is, you need to honor your employees and listen to what they're saying. Do not create employee resource groups if you're not going to listen to these people, because you're going to have people quit on you. And I know now things are shifting, right? It's like not the great resignation. Now we're going to lay everybody off. But I believe society's shifting and changing. And I think we all need to stand by the brands that are including us, by the schools, like you were mentioned, some of the schools you're supporting. I want to know those schools, because those schools mean that they care about us. And I want to know who they are so we can brag about them, because the more we brag about them, the more they'll do. But that's another thing, honestly, that we still haven't figured out. But what we're recommending in our community across the board is, do not make this just about people with disabilities. We need you to look at, Black and brown with disability, and then allow your employees to have a voice, a meaningful voice. And there's some wonderful programs that can do it. But I also nag, sometimes I feel like I'm the nag of the world, but I nag a lot of American brands that are only doing these things in the States. If you are a global brand and you're in other countries and you're not hiring Black people and promoting Black people and hiring people with disabilities, and I wonder why. Is it just because you're scared we're gonna? I have all kind of questions for you, brands. So I think that's another thing we got to figure out, but we figure it out together.
Let me ask you this, Deborah. Certainly people of color have become well practiced at sort of protest, boycott, holding companies accountable who aren't interested in hiring us, promoting us, or doing business with us. How would you say sort of the differently abled community, people with disabilities, are they organized in any way to sort of have an impact, using their power to have an impact on businesses in order to encourage them to do the right things?
And that is such a great question. And I want to say something that the rest of the communities need to do is we need to get behind the brown and black communities that are fighting for their rights. And if a company is leaving you out, we need to get behind it. So that's one reason why we're all getting together. But at first, we had some impact influencing these companies to include us. And we like to use the word, and the UN's using this now, not DEI, but DEIA. If we don't have the A in there, we're going to leave Tommy out. Tommy's going to get left out. Eric and I can probably figure it out with our disabilities. But Eric, for example, being colorblind, if you're using color as an indicator to Eric to say, hey, Eric, you got to do this, he's going to miss it because he can't see it. So it's interesting. In this case, you're more disabled than we are, whatever. But so it's understanding, what's happening and then explaining it to the brands so that they know, really how to include us. And I confused my head just then and forgot part of your question, Eric.
Oh,
but
that's okay.
It really,
you've answered it. You've answered it.
Okay, good.
About how do we support each other. I want to go back to something that you said earlier as well, because I want to affirm you, Debra, that I think there are two things that we have to continue to do as people that are really leaders, in this space, people that are inspiring, encouraging others to value human differences and similarities. I think there's two things that have to happen for us. Number one, we have to perpetually be about growth and growing and apologizing when we make mistakes. I think the worst thing that we could do is get to a place where we perceive ourselves as so interested in doing the right thing that when we offend others, that we aren't willing to apologize and recognize that from today to the day that we draw our last breath, that we'll constantly be sometimes making mistakes and we'll need grace for that. And a lot of times we'll have to apologize. But the other side of it is, I do want to say to you that I offer wonderful grace to you for the love and the passion that you have for all people. And I want you to know that I see you, and you don't have to be perfect for me to love and respect you and what you're doing. And I also appreciate your recognition that sometimes when people are hurt people might at times hurt others. They're just frustrated by the way the world has dealt with them. And so sometimes if we then choose not to be offended by that, it really helps. But you got to go somewhere where somebody says, Debra, I see you. I love what you're doing. You're not going to get it all right. Guess what? You don't have to.
Right.
You don't have to. That I'm going to basically, add it to your account because I know who you are and what your intention is. And so somebody needs to say that. But then at the same time, all of us need to be open to continuing to grow. And to leadership means, I told people I never recognized that leadership was going to mean I'd have to apologize so much. I just never, I thought the leaders were the people that were like kings. They walked over the people and everybody had to say they were sorry. I never knew that when I became a husband, that a good husband is the one that's apologizing the most. When I became a father, the good fathers are the ones that apologizing the most, And so I'm grateful for those painful opportunities of continued growth. And I think that as I do that, it enables me to model some things that might be worth following.
Yes. And I just want to say that I don't think, Eric, you should make your guests cry on the shows, but your words really touch me because it's been hard for all of us. It's been really hard. I had told y'all that my husband died, last March, and so many of us are walking these losses. And if nothing else, could we now have real compassion and empathy for each other and understand we come together? Like, I want to see you two on global stage because often the world looks to the United States. I know we screw things up, but it looks to us to say, wow, what are y'all doing? Y'all can say whatever you want, generally not get thrown in jail, but the American voices are needed in this fight around the world, because I know when I first became an entrepreneur as a Caucasian woman, I was told right away that I would never be successful in Virginia if I did not have a white male CEO. And let me tell you how mad that made me. And so I do not have a white male CEO. I do not. And how dare you tell me I have to do that? Anyway, but I honestly believe, though, we have to support each other. We have to support each other. We have to. That's the only way forward. I don't want to always bring God into this, but we are servant leaders.
Yes.
So we
We agree with
have
that.
to support. Yes. And I just don't understand. I mean, God made me white, and, but what do we do to help each other? Once again, with our privileges, and when we're being, whenever we're being stepped on, our communities are not being heard. But I do want to say, I've said it before, I want to say one more time, something that we're doing that is confusing the corporate brands. And I deal with them more. And I'm sure you both would say maybe this with education too, but we're confusing them. We're saying, okay, now we have the Me Too movement, which, by the way, very important movement. You better stop taking advantage of us women. We're tired of it. We're tired of them making more money than us. And by the way, a white man make more money than me, but then you look at a Black woman, and she makes less than I. Okay, anyway, it's all so screwed up, but we got to fix it. And so I think supporting each other, championing each other. I mean, that's what you did, Tommy. You were like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Okay. And then you joined the conversations. So then you expand it more, and we can help each other a little bit more. But I believe this is how you make the world a better place. I have an employee right now in Syria, and his beautiful children and him were underneath. They did not get hurt, but the pictures and the pain of these beautiful souls. But
Yes.
then we can do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So something that you also said earlier reminded me of a article, and actually a model that I've been using for some time. You talked about on the Twitter, and there was a comment that was made, and it unfortunately shut down the conversation. It reminded me of an organization called Stir Fry Seminars and Consulting out on the west coast of the US, California. And there is a model called the 21 Ways to Stop a Conversation About Diversity. And so let me share 5 ways.
That link.
Yes. And then, Debra, I'm going to ask you, what are some of the language, to Eric's point, that may stop conversations? Here's one. I don't see color. We're all just human beings. We have more similarities than differences. I think deep down, we're all the same. Racism, sexism happens all over the world. And the 5th one, I think some people use diversity as an excuse. These are 5 of the 21 ways to stop a conversation about diversity in general. So if we might, we've all heard these things, how people just shut down a conversation. Debra, from your experience, not only locally and nationally in the US, but also globally, what are some of the things that people say with regards to the community of persons with disabilities that really just shuts down the conversation?
Oh, there's just so many. There's so many. But there's just so many. But really, you can work even though you're blind. I'd rather be dead than blind. I mean, that's actually, we've heard that. We've heard coworkers say to another coworker, I'd rather be dead than blind. How horrible is your life? Well, that's an example of why you shut it down. Now, that's an extreme example. But is it? You don't look blind. Why are you always whining about captions? What, so it's just really constantly the lack of understanding. My daughter has an intellectual disability. So the way people attack that, and not really caring that we're trying to understand our language. Oh, I don't see color. Well, one time I said to Dr. Lamondre Pugh, who is an African-American, I said, I don't even see your disability. And he said, Debra, I love you so much. I need you to see all of me. I need you to see that I'm a proud Black woman. I need you to see that I am a man with disabilities. And Debra, it's part of a major part of my identity. Now, when I said that, I meant that so lovingly towards him. But then when I thought, oh my gosh, you just did it, Debra. But I'm doing the opposite of what you said, Tommy. I'm telling you, because that actually, when he said that, I thought, oh, wow, how did that unconscious, is it really still in there? So there's so many ways, but mainly, Tommy, I would say, I don't care what the topic is. When you go in there and you start being negative or hostile, you can scare people and they will stop because we've all just been so traumatized. And I also want to say, we have to do this. We have to dig into these. We have to dig into, what does it really mean to be Black or brown in the United States of America? And then once again, we'll go out our country, we'll talk about it there. We have to be very deliberate right now, breaking down our identities, because the unconscious biases that are there. I didn't know, my fellow, once again, sisters, we're dealing with that hair ridiculousness. Okay, that's just a stupid thing, but I don't want any discrimination over stupid crap. So I think, once again, it's about these type of conversations. You beautiful men out here changing the world, and you're like, hey, let's broaden it a little bit more, which is why I said, no, you now come on my show, because I have a following of 550,000 people globally, and I want them to know about your brilliance, because then it'll be like, oh, we could work with them. Oh, what great ideas. We could help them. We are stronger together.
I'm going to ask you a question too, but I don't know. Her first name has gotten away from me, from Blackish Ellis, the woman that was the mother on Blackish.
Tracy.
Tracy Ellis. So she's got a special on Black women's hair. If you've not seen that, Debra, oh, you're going to love it, because it has so many, it's so much education about Black women's hair and its power to them and what it's meant to them. That will really help you to understand where Black women come from, women of color come from, as they look at their hair and the openness or lack thereof, the Crown Act and all those kind of things. So I think that would be helpful. You'll love it. Secondly, I think it'd be helpful for you to give people a quick synopsis again on Global Impact, what you do within that organization, and then A Billion Strong. What are the main mission and objectives of those two organizations?
Okay. Well, and thank you for that. And I love her. And I will tell you, I love Blackish, and I have learned so much from Blackish. By the way, is why they created it. But they have taught me in a very funny way.
Right.
I can't remember what the name. Oh, I love Blackish. And I like all the spinoffs they've done too. Gorgeous little girl. Right. And then, and now you'll get me distracted. Rainbow, I think, was her name, right? So she goes back to her childhood. Anyway, sorry, big fan. And now I'm going to confuse myself on your question, Eric. And that's funny. I start going and then I forget.
That's all right. Just talking about the mission of Global Impact and the mission of A Billion Strong. Understand that.
What do I do for a living? I should be able to follow that. So I'm just going to tell you a quick little story. When my daughter was in middle school with Down syndrome, I started hearing again how she would add no value to the employment segment. And I was so surprised why we had decided already she could not work, because my daughter worked for years, so she can. But so I went there, and then I thought, and I created a company called Tech Access, where we really focused on technology, making sure it was accessible. Because if technology is not accessible to people that are blind or deaf or colorblind, or I can't use the mouse, then you leave us out. And that is not a good way forward. And so, and then I transitioned to Rue Global Impact. It was just going to be a placeholder name, but sort of got ahead of me. So now I'm Rue Global Impact. But what we do is we work with corporations, universities, NGOs around the world to advance the conversations of true inclusion of people with disabilities, from an employment perspective, from a client expectation. If you're a brand and you want to sell to us and your technology or your website's not accessible, you're leaving us out. So from an employment, from a client, but also from their brand perspective, Because right now we're curious in the world, are you a good corporation or are you a bad corporation? Is it really that cut and dry? Is it great? Absolutely. But at the same time, we want to know who you are by what you are producing and what you're doing. So that's what Root Global does. And we're a for-profit social enterprise. And I will admit on the air, I've been doing this a long time and we have struggled with cash flow because people really want to pay for social good. And I just want to say that. And I know everybody means well, but the reality when you come and say, and let me talk to you about diversity, it's not really, y'all know how this is, but that's also changing. It's changing in the world because what we do does matter. And please don't ask me to do it for free because you wouldn't ask a security expert or a privacy expert to do it for free. Just saying, right. So I know we're on the same page.
Right.
But then there was a beautiful thing that happened for our community and for all of our communities, the valuable 500. 500 major corporations at a CEO level got together with the World Economic Forum and agreed, openly agreed they were going to include people with disabilities in more meaningful ways. And they went out on thevaluable500.com and they've said it. But once again, you just can't take care of people with disabilities without taking care of people with disabilities that are brown and black, but all of the intersections. And so that was beautiful. But then I got a little bit scared because we talked about our biggest problem in the disability community is that 80% have invisible disabilities. You don't know who we are. We don't know who we are. Well, if we don't know who we are, how do the employers find us? So that's when I decided, and my husband was sadly actively dying, so it got to slow down appropriately. But that's why we created billion-strong.org, because to bring together the billions of people, but also all of our intersections. We want to fight for, our brown and black. And I say brown and black, which is a term you don't hear as much in the States, but we use that because that is more of a global. And when I say African Americans, everybody knows what I'm talking about, but then they think I'm just talking about the States. I'm not. I don't want anybody discriminated against. So I think the opportunities we all have is to come together, bring our expertise together, and help these employers, whoever they are, include us all. And I'm sorry, I don't want to hear the whining because you right now have to do the right thing by our populations because you have not. You have to deliberately hire our Black leaders. You have to deliberately promote them and give them more money and make them our CEOs. You have to be deliberate because they've been left out for too many years. And then you start including y'all, we know what has to happen. And now, billion-strong, we're trying to bring all of our community together so they can find us and also so we can have a bigger voice. And I'll give you one little sad example. And then I'll turn it over to you, Eric. But my daughter, born with Down syndrome, during COVID-19, if we had lived in Alabama, which thank goodness we don't, my daughter could have been denied life-saving help because she has Down syndrome. If somebody else said, wasn't broken, and I'm being sarcastic about broken, but that's chilling to me. That's chilling. So, yeah.
Right. So, and I want to say this again because I think it's so important for you to hear it, that God made you uniquely who you are, and he made you wonderfully who you are. So don't ever be discouraged by people who can't appreciate the you that comes in the wonderful package that God has placed you in. So I want to say that, but I also want to say that I'm at a place now, Tom and I talk about this all the time, where I'm okay with companies saying they don't value diversity, DEIB, DEIA. That's fine. Because people have the freedom, the right? Let's just say it, own it. If that's where you are, own it. But but I do believe that we have the opportunity to just inform people of that. So that you then have to kind of deal with that in terms of your business. And I think that as you think about it from a technology standpoint, that might just be a matter of trying to look at what are the technological solutions that we can put together that would help people to understand more about what companies are doing in sort of the what's the group that does the assessments of companies in terms of their cultures, the social media group. It's just me.
Uh, yeah.
There's so many of
Yeah,
them that do that.
I was going
But
to say there's so many.
yeah, but I think that really trying to take advantage of just informing our communities of how these businesses are doing, and then let people make their own decisions about whether. See, when we start letting people know that you haven't hired anybody, you don't have anybody in your leadership that's disabled, differently able, then you have to stand by that and then determine if you still don't care. But as long as you can operate and take advantage of the revenue stream of people, but then not value them, that's not going to work. So that's something else that we can think about in the click. I like your thinking about intersectionality. And I also want to tell you that I am okay if somebody is focused on issues of people with disability, that they may not include me as their primary focus. I'm okay with that because I want to think as globally as I can. I appreciate that you're constantly doing that, but I also have the character and the privilege to be able to say that I'm okay with people focusing on some segments of the DEIA space.
I agree because it's very complicated and nuanced. I will not
Yes.
get out there. Yeah, I'm not going to get out and tell you what the problems are for the African American community. I mean, I could try, but I'm not going to because there's too many other valuable voices.
Right.
But where we can add value is we come together. We come together to teach the nuances. We create our own certifications. I know people have created, oh, you're this, but it's not our community. So no, sorry. And so I actually want to work with our communities in the intersections to make sure we are saying who is including us. We're not going to be mean. We're not going to get out there and attack you unless you really hurt us. Okay. But only because there's plenty of people to do that. But we're going to brag about the people that are actually including us. And if you're not including other segments, we're not going to brag about you because that's doing wrong by our peers. But I want to bring up another diversity group we haven't talked about, and I'm part of them. The elderly. I'm not yet an elderly, but I'm almost like real close to. And that I've got gray and white hair because I'm in denial. No, I appreciate my age, but as we age, also discriminated against, right?
Yeah.
It's and a lot of the discrimination that people, seniors have, are they really mimic the same problems we have with the disability community. And there's also nuances and overlays of what happens to our African American communities. So we are stronger together. And I say that all the time, but it is so true. It's true.
Yeah, Deborah, it's been a rich conversation with you today. I love and appreciate the concept of working globally, understanding that there's different language and common terms in different parts of this world. And I believe that's very important. And here's one reason why. In the US, per my experience, and if it's a state, if it's a particular city, if it's a particular location, we can be narrowly focused about our reality based on the proximity that we have in that space. In other words, we use terminology, we call it colloquialisms, based on our immediate environment. And so the world is not bigger than our immediate environment from our perspective. And so when we say things like, we have diversity in our small town of 20,000, and I see one person of color. Yes, there's 3 people over here with disabilities. Yes, I see that. And we can count those people and believe that that is all, right? In reality is that this world is full of people, right? And many times we do not interact with the people of the world, but it doesn't mean that we need to exclude them in their lived experiences.
Yes.
And so, in other words, the world as it's experienced by human beings will come to us, right? One way, shape, or form. It will come to our organizations, right? We're looking at our brand, we're looking at expansion, we're looking at scaling. It will come by way of what we're experiencing now, a labor challenge, right? Folks say, we don't have the workforce. where are we looking and how are we defining workforce? Because there is a significant number of people that we're excluding from that definition of eligible employees, eligible candidates, right? So what you've been saying today around true inclusion, making an impact, I love that, global impact, and continuing this conversation. I will echo what Eric has said about you personally and then professionally. I don't know what's happening, Eric. The folks that we are bringing into this conversation it's blowing up.
Yeah.
We are going to do the global work and what
Yes.
God has designed us to do. It is happening. So thank you, Debra. Thank you, Eric. And thank you for our community today.
Right. And Debra, I'll end with this, that you've been a gift to us this morning. And I just want to say to you, continue to be who you are. It's okay to keep growing and learning, but understand that everything about the unique package that God has placed you in is perfect.
Oh,
And the world needs you in your full authenticity, because you haven't even been, you are so focused on equity and inclusion that you actually couldn't even hardly jump into what you do, because you were so much into being inclusive of everybody else. I mean, I love it. I love it. And so we just have to observe you being authentically who you are. And I'm going to say to you that that is your gift to the world. And my prayers will be with you. I appreciate the fact that God is blessing you in the loss of your husband. When we lose somebody that we're close to and we love deeply, there's a hole in our lives for the rest of our lives. But they are also perpetually with us through our memory. And I know that your husband is very proud of the fact that you picked yourself up and you jumped right back into the game, and you are making a beautiful impact and difference in the world around you. You've done that this morning for us, and Tommy and I and our community are grateful for who you are and the work that you're doing. Thank you.
thank you so very much. I just am so blessed to get to know you too, because we're going to do even more God's work now. And everybody in the community, please, please join billion-strong.org. It's free. It's not, but the numbers.
I joined.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. No, I've got much bigger roles for you too. So I'll be coming back. And I'm going to introduce you to LinkedIn. I don't know if you know about Terry Rice, an African-American entrepreneur that does all these interviews of other African-Americans. I'm going to introduce y'all to him too. We're stronger together. Let's all be heard, and God's working.
Yes,
So,
he is. Yes, he is.
All right.
thank you both.
All right.
Thank you.
Tommy, you want to sign us out?
Yeah, again, thank you all for joining us for another Conversations of Diversity Conversations. We were joined today by Debra Rue, CEO and founder of Global Impact and other initiatives globally and locally. On behalf of Eric Ellis and myself, please enjoy the rest of the day. We'll see you again on Diversity Conversations. Take care.